Hi youth, I hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to read the account of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead and share a couple of thoughts on this passage. I'm going to read some sections from John chapter 11, so starting with verses 1 to 4. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of Man may be glorified through it. After this, Jesus stayed where he was for another 2 days before leaving to go to Bethany. When he got to Bethany, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. We pick up the account again when Martha, Lazarus' sister, speaks to Jesus, starting at verse 21. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Then, from verse 32 onwards, Now, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit, and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odour, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Unbind him and let him go. There are 2 key points from this passage that I would like to talk about. So first, in this account, we see Jesus' own response to suffering and to death. In verse 33, it says that when Jesus saw Mary and the other people weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. Then, in verse 35, Jesus wept out of sorrow for his friend Lazarus, and in response to the grieving of his friends, Martha and Mary. The crowd noticed this and exclaimed, See how he loved him. This passage shows us how Jesus, like us, encountered suffering, just as we have to cope with death and disease and suffering here on earth. Jesus also had to cope with these things. And I think this can provide comfort to us, because we know that we have a God who hasn't stayed far away in heaven and who isn't distant from us now. Jesus was fully man and fully God and experienced all of the pain, suffering, and temptations that we all experience. Secondly, this passage shows us how Jesus has power over death. The crowd there seemed to think that Jesus could have saved Lazarus from dying, but they do not seem to have thought that he could raise Lazarus from the dead. They thought that death was final. Jesus had arrived too late, and that there was nothing that he could do to bring back Lazarus. Even Martha, who had faith in Jesus as the Christ, and who told Jesus that she believed Lazarus would rise again in the resurrection on the last day doesn't seem to have been fully convinced that Jesus could raise Lazarus from the dead there and then. When Jesus told them to take away the stone from Lazarus's tomb, she was worried about the smell that this would release. But Jesus showed that he did have power over death, and Lazarus got up and walked out of the tomb. The reason this is important is because Jesus promises life after death for all who believe in him. In verse 25, Jesus said, "Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live, and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." That promise still applies to us here today, and as a result, we know that we can trust in a God who suffered like us and who died so that we can have eternal life. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great week.